Welcome, everybody. We are back in the crypt. I told you another great interview is lined up. I promised you guys I would be getting my guest back for part three. This is a three-part interview. I wanted to break it down into three parts because we covered so many important topics. I can be talking none other than Alexander Raskovic, and I've had him here twice. So I hope you guys have been keeping track, watching the interviews that I have. So you got to definitely watch part one and two before you watch this one. So if you haven't seen those two, go watch them first, or you're gonna. This is building on something here, guys. So welcome. I'm so excited to be here once again. Have my guest on to cover some important topics again. We're going to be wrapping this up with this third part. We're going to be covering a great topic because we're talking about slavery. We've covered so many things. We've covered so much, and this is going to be a great way to wrap it up because the question is going to be, can we live in a world with total freedom? Can we live without government? And these are discussions I have with so many people in my personal life and friends around me and even on the internet, guys. And this is a great question. Like, what would the world look like if there was no slavery, if there was no government, there was no authority figures controlling people? Can we achieve that? Can this be achieved? Is this something that can even be attained in this day and age, or are we too far down the path? These are the questions I always ask and I get into conversations about. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome my guest into the show here. Welcome, Alexander. It's so great to have you back. We are here. We made it, my friend. Part three.
Well, my pleasure, Rick. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Been excited about this topic. And I just want you to dive into it. As I was saying just now in the intro, this is a conversation, coincidentally, I really, truthfully, guys, that I've had within the last week more than I care to actually admit. This seems to be a conversation that keeps coming up in the last week, and even before that, but really like this week especially. We get talking. I get talking to people about government, and I get talking about slavery and all of the things that we've been discussing in part one and two, Alexander. And then they always come back at me that most of them don't think that we could even have a society without government, that it can't even be attained, and they're really kind of down, almost black pilled, where they just think that this is the way things are. So I want you to touch on that, and let's get into this. What would it look like, Alexander, and can we attain it?
Well, yeah, to start off, Rick, I mean, you have to clarify that before you start any discussion, you need to be clear on what the terms mean. So
Correct.
when you talk about, we can't live without a government, or what is it? What is your conception of the word government? What is the definition of the term government mean to anyone saying that? So because I say that because it actually is pretty relevant, because the term itself is a pretty vague term. It means so many things to many
Mm-hmm.
different people. So that's why before you talk about something like that, I think a personal one-on-one discussion is actually the best way to try to ruminate about such a topic, like a world based on freedom and voluntary interaction. Like we discussed in the previous two interviews that we did. How the specific lines of questioning. What the way you can approach somebody and talk to somebody about these concepts and ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And we primarily talked about the things you shouldn't be doing, which is preaching to people and explaining to people, like evangelizing sort of your beliefs onto other people, when actually everything that humanity needs to have is already inside of them when it
Yeah,
comes
I
to
agree.
understanding voluntarism and
I totally agree.
just libertarianism is a preferable term. But yeah, like you can't reason somebody out of a belief that they weren't reasoned into to begin with.
That's
So,
a good point.
the reason people get frustrated when they try to explain these principles of freedom to people is because of their own mindset. It is not because of the individual they are talking to. If you're looking at humanity through the lens of a dichotomy, where, there are the awake and the asleep, there are the voluntarists and the statists. And, I see that all the time. And it's this very mindset of us versus them. And we need to change their minds Well, frankly, the truth is we don't get to go into people's minds and reprogram them.
Right.
Nor should we ever have the ability to do that. And you wouldn't be much of a voluntarist if you wanted to possess that sort of ability. Because that's what free will is for. They're supposed to make those steps themselves. And all you can do is guide them along the way. So, again, for the people who have watched the previous episode where we actually broke down some of these lines of questioning and the principles that pertain to, asking people specific questions to bring out the voluntarist out of them
Mm-hmm.
in a way, without preaching to them about your own beliefs. Trying to ask them questions about what they believe and trying to get them to answer them, to see the contradiction inside their own belief system. Because inevitably, everybody who is a statist, everybody who believes that believes that, how do I say this? Everyone who believes in government has contradictions in their own belief system,
That's true.
and in their whole paradigm. So yeah, if you haven't watched the second episode, please do that, because it's very, very pertinent and very important. But
It really is. Yeah. It really, you, and the questions that we go through are so powerful. And I've been using that. Like, when I get into these conversations, Alexander, these questions that you lay out in part two are really helpful, because it's like you said, it's great for a discussion. And then when you're asking these questions, they're answering it. And then you can see as they're answering these questions and you get talking, their mind working, right? Because it's like you said, they know what they see the divide kind of like when they're answering it. So at least it gets them thinking afterwards. I know it does.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I love the example Larkin Rose once gave about the surgeon. So when you, Rick, go out skateboarding and you break your leg, and let's say that I'm a surgeon and you ask me, Doctor, can you fix my leg? Well, I would say, no, sir, I cannot fix your leg. What I can do, however, is set up the condition in such a way so that your body can fix itself. I align the bones, I do an x-ray to check, I put a cast on it, and now, Rick, your body will heal itself. Unless you decide to go skateboarding again. And that's how you have to look at freeing people's minds. You don't get to free their minds for them. They have to free their own minds, and all you can do is set up the condition by asking them questions so that they can see the conflict inside of their own head, and now they're finally thinking about something they've never thought about before. Similarly, when a surgeon is trying to push on the leg and is trying to get it attached and is trying to fix it himself, you're only making matters worse. And that's why no surgeon does that.
Yeah.
Because, you don't understand the role you're supposed to play. You don't get to fix their leg. Their own body is supposed to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
Understand your role. Your role is simply to get them to the point where they are faced with the contradiction in their own mind by walking them through the epistemology by means of questions. And they will see the void in the epistemology, in the build-up. And they will see that their own beliefs about right and wrong don't match their beliefs about politics. And they will choose which one wins out at the end of the day, their own moral code or the political doctrine. They make that choice themselves. We don't get to decide what other people believe. And the beauty is, we don't have to. We don't have to convince anybody of anything. They already have everything they need.
That's so true.
I mean, the many times, since I've learned this method of communicating to people based on questions. So, one of the rules that applies to this method is, have it a one-on-one, have it be a one-on-one discussion. So don't have any audience like chime in or anything. Don't have any spectators in the room. So, and also one very important rule as well is don't bring your own beliefs into the conversation. You don't matter. When you're talking more than they are, then you're losing.
Wow, that's good advice, though.
And the thing is, when you're talking, I talked to a lady. Well, I actually talked to many people like this. Many people who are already somewhat, on the conservative leaning, like on the right side of the political spectrum, who have like. If you just ask people, like, one way you can ask people is like, if you could, instead of these like package choices, like you get to choose some sort of politician that has a package of all kinds of things that you might agree with, but he also has some things that you don't agree with. But
Hmm.
then there is, you can choose between which package of politician you want. You can choose that puppet, you can choose that one, and depending on which ratio of things that you like versus things that you don't like, that's usually how it goes with politics. People choose the best out of out of two
It's true.
evils. Or when you live in the Netherlands, that's this it apply, or any democratic country, if you want to call it that. Not that I'm a proponent of democracy at all, but like instead of having that, like instead of you having to pick one package that and you hope that he's going to do what he promises to do with your money, wouldn't you prefer to spend your own money? Like
Mm.
if you get a letter in your let's say in your mailbox, and you had like a list of all kinds of things that you would have the option to finance. So like the infrastructure. Okay, so I would like to fund the infrastructure. I'll check that. I'll check that box. I would like to fund the education system. I check that box as well. Wars. I'm not a proponent of wars. I'm not going to fund that. I'm just going to leave that open. And, like, I don't want to fund that endeavor on that. Well, I would like to fund, this whatever. You can pick whatever
Right.
thing, or defense. I would like to have local defense or whatever. You be whether it's we'll get into the specifics, but wouldn't you the fundamentals of it is the foundation of it is, wouldn't you like to choose what things you fund or what things you don't want to fund? Wouldn't you prefer that that freedom for yourself? And
Hmm.
many times I ask people this question and people say yes, well, I would like that. Well, okay, then I asked them, like, would you extend that freedom to me? Would you, want me to have that ability as well? And that this is going to get them thinking, because again, it's about them. It's about what they believe, and all about what I believe. I first of all, I agree with them. I say I would love for you to have that ability. Like, I'm on your side.
Hmm.
I want you to have full autonomy over whatever you possess and over the things that you rightfully acquired. So, and I want you to have, all the freedom in the world to make your own decisions with your own money. So, would you extend that freedom to me? And again, they've never thought about this. So their brain is just working and working. Like, yeah, well, I guess that wouldn't be very equal then, right? If I want that freedom for myself, then I guess I'm going to have to give it to you, then, right?
Hmm.
But then, then comes the next part. Like, then I asked them, okay, well, would you extend that ability? Would you extend that freedom to the rest of the world? And then, then you see them, some of them. Then you see them, working it out, like, because they understand the ramifications of it. That means that eventually, like, wow, what if nobody wants to fund the things that I want to have funded? Like,
Hmm.
obviously those things will be funded. If people want to have that, that's the essence of a free market. If things want to have something, if there is a demand for something, it will be there.
That's
and
true.
and it'll always, that's just basic reality and basic economics. But to get people to think about that's the goal. It's apologies, I'm getting stuck here, but
That's okay. I think you're just
I'm
bringing up great points, like really powerful, Alexander. I'm just thinking about what you're saying. Like, if we could get a cert, like, you get, like you said, in the mailbox, you get a list and you pick what you want, what you have a say in things instead of these package deals. And you're so right. I talk to people all the time that are talking about the different politicians, and it's like, well, I support some of these things that they do, but I don't like this stuff. But if I want them, I got to take the good. I hear that all the time. I got to take the good with the bad. What a different way of looking at it. If you could actually get a survey or whatever you want to call it, a list, and you have a say in it, and people like you don't want to fund war, like you said, that's so powerful. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, no, obviously, Rick, and it's just how do I say this? So I bring this question up sometimes, like because many people who are from the right-leaning side here in the Netherlands, where I live, people have, their various, people who vote who are still, big, they have their politician that they support. Well,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people say, instead of asking, because this is something that a lot of people will do as well, when you're asking these questions, they will try to tiptoe around it. They will try to do as, they're not doing this consciously, obviously, but, they're doing this because the question is very uncomfortable for them.
Right.
So they want to find a way to evade, avoid answering the question because they know what that would imply, and they're just trying to get away from that, uncomfortable feeling that very, actually that realization.
Yeah,
But
realization.
but actually, what some people will do, like, okay, would you want that ability? Would you like to have the ability to fund the endeavors that you would like to fund? Well, sometimes people say, well, I know this politician, and this politician I am all in favor of. He has everything, and he has my vote. Obviously that wasn't an answer to the question, but that they're subconsciously trying to evade the question because this is just human psychology, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I do, and what I say then is, okay, well, you say that you would like to have that politician in office and that everything that he wants to support you're in favor of. Well, let's say that I am not in favor of a particular endeavor that he wants me to fund. Well, should I be forced to fund something that I am against? And then like that's where
Right.
that's another chance to get them to think. Well, I don't want to, I want it to be voluntary, especially, like, so,
Mm-hmm.
obviously after, getting them to think, they say, okay, yes, obviously, I want, no, I don't want you to be forced. But, then some people will say like, well, but taxes, I mean, you can't escape taxes. Well, again, that isn't an answer to the question, but I don't try to make it a discussion about, taxes, what, taxation is theft and all of that. I don't try to make it a discussion or a debate, that's not the point. I'm trying to get, instead of arguing about, well, that's just how it is. I just try to ask them, I understand that. I understand that that's the situation we're in right now. But what is your opinion about it? What do you believe about it? And that's when you try to focus it on them. Like, do you support that I be forced to fund something that I'm against? Yeah, well, no. And then they already see that there is a conflict, that they're already faced with the conflict inside of their own head. And that's just all that I'm trying to do. I'm just
Right.
trying to get them to see, like, their own beliefs about right and wrong, the voluntarist inside them, someone who wants voluntary interaction, who doesn't want to force people, who doesn't want to threaten people with violence, who doesn't want all of that. It's that their true humanity faced with the authoritarian indoctrination, faced with the political doctrine, and they're in the ring. And
Right.
I'm just cheering for their humanity, basically. And that's again, that's just the way that's just how this method works, and it's just so brilliant. And I always have success doing it this way because, I mean, we're going to talk about this later on as well. But I mean, humans are truly, if you can just, if you really find out what they really believe in, and if you just have a good conversation with them, nobody wants this. Nobody wants to
Yeah.
have, forced extortion. Nobody wants to have all of this, authoritarian control over other people's lives. Nobody's in favor of it. They've just been trained to believe something that is contradistinct to their own beliefs about right and
Right.
wrong, that is in contradiction with their own humanity. And
Good
that's
point.
that's how, that's why I like the, Matrix aphorism, free your mind. Like, you're trying to free themselves from a lie they've been taught all their lives since the time they've entered schools. Because, that's not what they truly believe. And that's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to ask them, you know, but some people might call it, you're interrogating them. But, in a sense, yes, you are. I'm trying to find out, is this what do you believe? Do you really believe in in the political doctrine, in the most dangerous superstition, as it is called?
Yeah.
And if you ask the questions right and keep your own, presence out of it, really the only time I ever introduce my own opinions into the discussion is when I agree with them. When
Right.
I say, like, yeah, I agree. I don't want you to be forced, or I do want you to have the ability to choose for yourself.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Like, not to try to get too emotional and bring your own opinions in. I think that's such great advice. That, and I think I've fallen prey to that, and I think a lot of people have. You kind of start giving your own thoughts and your own opinions, and then it turns chaotic usually very quickly, because then you're both kind of put a line in the sand. It seems to come down to both people put a line in the sand, and you're just defending these points, and each of you just want to be right, kind of thing. So when you get
Yeah.
them when you get them answering their own questions, and you're just letting them, like the process you just explained, it's a way easier conversation. I find at least it goes smoother.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I actually have, the conversations that I have with people is I just, I've had this conversation, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, but quite some times, but quite a few times, but it never turned into discussion or heated debate. It was
Hmm.
always a friendly discussion, and we laughed afterwards, and I got I actually got them to think about something, like
Right.
the neighbor that I talked about last time. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
asked them these questions, like, well, would it be moral for me to, like, the questions I asked you previously, like,
Yeah.
would it be moral for me to, like, if I wanted to fund an education system, or if I wanted to, donate money to the poor or the less fortunate, should you have the should you have the do you think that you should you have the ability to donate voluntarily, or do you think it's okay to, if for me to force you to fund something, to force you to fund the endeavor that I want you to fund? And yeah, like, they would say, obviously, no, I don't want to be forced. That's
Right.
nobody wants that for themselves. And
Yeah.
then, okay, well, what if you would propose, you would like to fund an endeavor, like, let's say, a defense system, or the infrastructure, or whatever endeavor it might be? Should I be forced to fund something? Should I be forced to fund your endeavor, or should I have the choice to donate voluntarily or contribute voluntarily? And inevitably, they say yes, of course. You should. It should be voluntary. And then you get them to the contradictions. Like, is there a way that, an individual or group of individuals could delegate or give away a right that none of us have to some other individual? And, obviously they said, no, that doesn't make any sense. Like, if it's wrong for me to steal from somebody, then obviously it's wrong for
For
anybody else,
everyone.
and
Yeah.
for everyone to steal. Like, the maxim of, we're all equal.
Yeah.
We should be consistent with it. But,
I agree.
then you go into questions like, okay, is there any document or ritual? Is there any way in which we could change that? We can alter morality? Excuse me. In which we could, is there any way that in which we could change an immoral act into a moral act without changing the act itself? Like, by way of, you just ask them that question and they say, no, that doesn't make any sense. But then you take it further, like we did last time. Like, okay, well, what if we had an election? Like, us, the hundreds or millions of people, had an election, and we had a vote, and we appointed one of us as our representative. With that, and we all agreed that he now has the right to to steal from you and assault you if you didn't let us take whatever we want to take from you. Well, would that be okay? Well, no, that doesn't. That also doesn't
Right.
make sense. Well, what if we change the names around? Like, let's say that we called the act of. What if he wrote it down on a piece of paper, and let's say that he called it, instead of calling it, the a piece of parchment, he called that practice legislation, and he called the piece of parchment the law. And what if he called the people he sends out to collect your money the law enforcers? So already you're just trying to guide them through the epistemology, guide them through the foundation of authoritarianism and
Mm-hmm.
statism, and they will see, wow, like, I mean, what I've been believing all the time, I mean, it has no foundation to it. There's a
Right.
huge void that I'm just, it doesn't have any feet to stand on. Like, and that's you're getting them to ruminate about.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, like, so when people say, well, people are just too stupid to understand voluntarism, no, they are not. Pardon me, but you're just not doing it right. Your
Yeah.
mindset is, I have to change this person's mind, so I have to lecture at them about all these basic principles. No, you don't. Your mindset, again, as we discussed in the previous interview, should be, this is an individual who has a conscience, who knows that theft and assault is wrong. They've just been convinced that it's okay when it's done through politics. They've been lied to. And since there is no rational foundation for that lie, I just need to show it to them by walking them through it from the ground up, and reach the point where they start to see the conflict between their own moral conscience and the political doctrine. And these lines of questioning only apply to the issue that truly matters, by the way, which
Right.
is the belief in authority. Like, many people, um, so when we when I've had these conversations with people, everybody understands theft is wrong. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
understands that you
Yes.
can't delegate a right you don't have. Everybody understands that there is no exemption from morality. Everybody understands that there is also no document or scribble or ritual that can alter morality. And everybody understands that if the law conflicts with your own moral conscience, that in whatever way you ask the question, like by using a hypothetical, like we did last time, like
Mm-hmm.
you can talk about slavery, for instance. Like, slavery was the law. It was legal. And
It really, yeah.
and if you ask them, like, if the law tells you to do something that is wholeheartedly wrong, like slavery was, and doing the right thing would require you to break that law by freeing slaves, would you do it? And then you can get them to see the logic behind that as well, which they already understand. Like,
Yeah.
everybody understands, like, when it comes to the more, but they just never. The point is, they've just never thought about it.
They
And
don't. They don't give a thought. Yeah.
at that point where they're actually contemplating about the issue, like, wow, when it comes, at the end of the day, when it comes to it, like, my own moral conscience outweighs all the legislators, all the lawmakers, all the politicians in the world. And my own free will stands above the law, because my own judgments and my own moral conscience outweighs the law. Because at the end of the day, I am the one who decides whether I obey it or not, whether I choose to follow the law or not. Because
That's a
I
great point, Alexander. Wow. Yeah, you're the one that does the act. I mean, that's such a powerful thing. Like, they can have all the laws they want, but at the end, you're the one taking the action, which is so important. And so, I mean, you bring up such great. You always get me thinking, and I really enjoy these conversations. And I know a lot. I know the people watching do too, because I get response. I interact with them and get their thoughts on it, and they really do like the way you break it down. And but I do like, these are discussions I get into. Quite often, and it just seems to. And I want to kind of touch on. Um, can you, like, a lot of the people I speak with, they can't even picture a world without somebody like ruling over them, without an authority figure. And we've kind of touched on it, and I'm sure we've all heard it, that if there wasn't this authority figure writing the laws and keeping people in check, that it would just fall apart. And so I want to get into the discussion, like, can we change where we are? Because we see what's going on in the world, and it's so chaotic, and things are, we're losing our rights and it's just like, I mean, and everybody that's watching knows the state of the world and the shape we're in, and especially the way humanity is and how immoral people are. And there's a lot going on. It's a lot happening at once. Do you think that we can change this? Like, there's a lot of the people I speak with, they think it's too far gone. So I want you to touch on that, like, because I'm really interested in what you think about that.
Well, sure. Well, I think we shouldn't pay too much attention to, various media outlets who are, like it's one thing. Like, look, I'm not going to make it a discussion to talk about, like what other media sources are talking about. I just use my own ratiocination. I look at the world and I actually talk to people. I engage with
Right.
people. I'm not, I don't have the time to, talk to people in these comment sections and under all these crazy videos
Mm-hmm.
that make all these predictions. But like one thing, it's one thing to say like, are we going to get there, and how do we picture a world without government? Well, let me just make it perfectly. Let's just be very clear about something. If one picture somebody, picture the time where we were using mercury and arsenic to cure conditions of ill health back
Okay.
in the 1800s, or like the beginning, like a century ago, not that long ago actually.
Mm-hmm. Right. And
that
it
that
hasn't been.
like it's where people were actually using mercury and arsenic to cure diseases, well, I prefer the term conditions of ill health. But yeah, it's, I mean, if I go up to somebody like that, like some guy in the 21st century who understands that, no, you shouldn't use mercury and arsenic to cure conditions of ill health,
Right.
like I'm going to sort of go up to them and say, look, maybe you shouldn't do that. Like he's using mercury and arsenic, and his conditions only get worse, and many people just die after
Mm-hmm.
using it. So I tell them, well, you shouldn't be doing that. Maybe you should be using something else. Maybe you should, put some ice on that. They like if it's like a wound, maybe whatever you can come up with, like various natural healing approaches, or whatever approaches you can think of. But certainly, it's not going to be
Right.
tantamount to the detriments the detrimental effects that mercury and arsenic can have. Like, and imagine that person, like I go up to them and they say, and I tell them, you shouldn't be using mercury and arsenic. You should be using something else. You should be doing something else about that. Like, and that person would reply, oh, no, 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 no. I'm going to keep using mercury and arsenic unless and until you can explain to me in great detail how I will heal in any if I used any other method.
Mm-hmm.
Because unless you can guarantee that I will be cured and I will be healed and I would be, I would be 100% healthy and everything would be fine if I use, whatever approach that you suggest to me,
Mm-hmm.
unless you can guarantee that I'll be 100% healthy, I'm going to keep using mercury and arsenic. Well, that is not a rational. I mean, I can't guarantee that you'll be healthy afterwards, but I can guarantee that for the time that in the time that you're going to, if you can keep using mercury and arsenic, your condition is not going. You're not. I guarantee that it'll get a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way I look at this whole situation with governments. Like, I mean, people are asking, well, unless you can guarantee that, how you can explain to me in great detail how everything would work and how my safety would be guaranteed and how this would be guaranteed, I'm going to keep believing in something that leads to my
That's
own detriments every single time throughout. as demonstrated throughout every single time in history, and as it is doing now.
Yep.
I mean,
Good
it's
point.
just ridiculous to make that argument. It's just a very very weird non sequitur that people are making. Like, yeah, unless you can tell me how
How it's
how
all going to work, right? Every detail, but
if I'm
yeah,
going, I've been trained to hit myself in the head with a pan like three times a day if I have a headache. And I go up to them and say, "Mate, well, you shouldn't be doing that. Maybe you should, take some rest. Maybe do something else. Like, no, 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 no. I'm going to keep hitting myself in the head unless you can guarantee to me that rest or ice or whatever can bring about a better outcome. No, what you're doing is stupid, mate. You should be doing that." And
yeah,
that's it's just a very 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 weird and irrational argument to make, and that's how it is with most people. They fear the unknown, and that's
absolutely, yeah,
that's just another thing that has come about through the schooling, well, indoctrination system.
absolutely,
I
it
don't I
has.
don't I don't even want to call it education anymore, but yeah, I mean the things that you learn in school, you get like there's so many things that you can talk about that, but considering the time that we have, I mean, one thing that they destroy inside of a child is their imagination. They
I agree.
they can't even imagine a world beyond that which they have been convinced is the only thing that should be. And
Yeah,
when people actually and that's actually what creativity is all about. When people have the look, I'm not going to be the emperor of a stateless society. I mean, the
hmm
thing is, if you want to talk to somebody about once again, if you get into a discussion about governments, like, well, I just first of all, many people have a very the position, how do I say, minarchism or the belief in statism is not based on any underlying philosophy, or coherent premise. I mean, many minarchists have different opinions about what a government is supposed to be and what
hmm
it's supposed to do. Some of them, want voluntary taxation, which is an oxymoron, but okay. And others
It's
want
funny.
very, very, little forced taxation, and so that government can spend it on important things. And minarchists also don't always agree about what is important, quote unquote. Some minarchists are actually, libertarian, anarchists, and they also just want to have organization that is based on mutual agreements and voluntary coexistence. They just, abstain from calling it government
Right?
because
Yeah, a different
I mean,
name.
they just abstain from calling it anarchy, because they just want to call it government. That's just the term they prefer to use that, and they're just scared to call themselves anarchists because the communists, have misrepresented the philosophy of anarchism for so long, and they assume that it's the whole, every man for himself, no rules, no hierarchy,
hmm
no organization thing, like the various straw man arguments that have been going coming through left, right, and center. But the point is, the so let me just get to the point here.
Okay.
What the question that some questions that I usually ask minarchists is, what do you think a government should have the ability to do that ordinary people wouldn't have the ability to do if they
That's a
did it by
good
way
question.
of that ordinary people wouldn't have the ability to do if they did it by way of mutual agreement and voluntary interaction. What do you think a government should have the ability to do if that ordinary people wouldn't have the ability to do by
hmm
way of mutual agreements? And if your answer is something akin to, well, defend against foreign and domestic aggression, well, I agree. But would you be able to explain how such a defense force will be funded? Will it be voluntary funding, or will it be demanded from people under the threat of violence? Well, then you get them thinking like, okay, well, if you're consistent with a non-aggression principle, for those of you who are coming from that realm, some people would obviously say, well, yeah, yeah, it has to be voluntary. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
if it's voluntary, then I would agree, obviously. But let's say that I and a few others were not interested in your defense force because we think that we would do a better job at it if we had our own private defense company that would do the exact same thing, defend
Mm-hmm.
against foreign and domestic aggression. Just our private security company, would, likewise be funded voluntarily by the people in our town because they already know us and know that we are reliable. They prefer our local private security service over your centralized defense force. Would your government be okay with that? Or would it try to interfere and do something about it, to get rid of the competition, so to speak? And if so, could you explain in literal and specific terms what your government would do about our private security company? Well,
Wow.
if it's okay with it, if you say, well, no, we wouldn't interfere with it. Well, I agree. Okay, that's very good. Now, what if multiple towns throughout the area would also prefer their own private security company in lieu of your centralized one? Would your governments be okay with that as well? If so, then that is the voluntarist position.
Yeah, right.
There you have yourself a voluntarist. You and the people who voluntarily work with you have your own local organization in the area where you are located. Other people have their own local organization in the area where they are located. If you prefer to call that government, then, I fail to understand why, but that's
Mm-hmm.
beside the point because, again, I don't like arguing about terms, because terms, are so vague. They mean one thing to someone else and and another thing to
That's so
somebody
true.
else. It's
Yeah.
and if there are people who don't want something like that, who don't want to participate in some sort of organized little town or whatever, who don't want to fund for education, who don't want to fund for defense because they are very self-reliant and self-responsible. I have guns. Let's say that. Suppose that individual would say like, I am armed. I'm perfectly equipped and skilled enough to defend myself and my own family. I don't want to have any. I don't want that service. And yeah, I mean, instead, those people would maybe prefer to live in nature with their family and want to do
Mm-hmm.
things differently. Well, that's okay as well. There won't be any zoning laws.
Yeah, that's
And
true. Wow.
so I mean, that's where that's the way you can guide them because once again, if you ask these questions to people, if you ask people these questions, then you can get then you can get somewhere.
Yeah.
Instead of arguing about terms and predictions. I never try to do that because it's just a waste of time. Try to ask somebody about the specifics about what they're advocating, and then we can get somewhere.
That's a I like that method that you're explaining. Like because we get hung up on certain like topics, and that's what I was trying to say earlier is that people kind of put their line in the sand, and then it's just an argument back and forth, and they just each person wants to be right, and then nothing really comes of it except a big argument. And so I like the way that you're saying, to ask, this is a way to go about it, is asking these questions and having them think about it. It's so powerful to me. And but Alexander, I think about it. Just the world is so complicated and I'm trying to word this in a way that makes sense to people, because I really do have a lot of discussions with people, because I have people say, well, the world, it's not as simple as what you're saying. There's so many moving parts in society, in the world, in people's own lives, that what we're talking about, it's not as simple as, okay, everything's voluntary, and and it's not that simple, as I was saying, because people's lives are complicated. So it really gets into a pretty intense discussion sometimes, at least for me, and not intense in a bad way, but it's like, they have their point, and I see what they're saying. I really do try to see everybody's thoughts, and I want to hear their thoughts and their points of view, because I do think that's where learning and that the
Well,
best answers come. But this is such a big problem because it's so many moving parts, if you know what I mean.
okay, what do you mean by moving parts?
I like there's just people, when I say moving parts, I'm like, people, like, I'm trying to like think of some of the things that people have said to me. Okay, like for an example, I can give you an example of what somebody said to me recently. um they don't mind having authority figures, and if you want to call them government, that's what they said. They don't mind having government uh, taking care of things. They don't want that responsibility. And I've had people say that. Like, there is people that want, which is crazy to me, but they want to kind of give up having to worry about that, right? So they're okay with somebody taking the reins and kind of guiding things. So that's kind of what I've heard some people say. There is some people that don't mind being ruled, I guess, it's the simplest way I can put it, if you understand what I mean.
Okay, let me just make the distinction very clear here,
Okay.
Rick. I also don't want. Some things I also don't like to be. Let's say there are things that I don't like doing as well. I don't like doing myself. I don't. I lend that to somebody else, like
Hmm.
taking out the trash or something else,
Right.
taking away the response. If I'm just making a very vague example
No, that's
here,
the
but
best. Yeah, that's
I
perfect.
mean, but the point is, am I transgressing on somebody else's right to exercise, make that choice for themselves?
Hmm.
Because that's the heart of the matter. When people say I don't mind being ruled, well, what does that mean? Like if the problem isn't that you don't mind to be ruled, but the thing, what are you advocating that others what are you advocating to be done unto people who don't want to be ruled?
Right.
That's the point.
That's
Like
a big point. Yeah.
if
Yep.
if you want to be ruled by somebody, you go right ahead. I mean, we can
That's your
argue about that
choice.
all. That's your choice. I
Yep.
mean, good luck with that. But if some people want to do things in a way that is different, like let's say they want to have their own local organization, they want to, live voluntarily. Well, let's say they want to organize and coexist peacefully based on mutual agreements and voluntary
Hmm.
interaction, like we've said. Well, if they suppose that they, don't want to participate or fund the things that you want them to fund, or, participate in things that you want them to participate in, well, what do you advocate for those people to be done? What do you advocate to be done unto those people?
Right. Yeah.
If you say, well, there are consequences, that's something that many people will say. Like, well, there are consequences. You're supposed to pay taxes. You're supposed to do this.
Hmm.
Well, once again, we're not arguing about what the state is what actually is taking place. We're talking about what you are advocating. So, what do you want to have done unto those people? I understand that there are consequences, but what consequences do you want to have happen unto those people? And
Good
I'm just
question.
trying to I'm just trying to and my goal is to try to get those people to be specific and clear about what they want to have done unto those people. If you want to send if you think that there should be a bunch of armed mercenaries who knock down their door, drag them away from their friends and family, and lock them up in a cage for several years because they didn't, pay tribute to the politicians that you support, and that's just, I mean, okay, well, if I suppose that I suppose they wouldn't be advocates of that, but if they were saying like, yes, well, that I want a group of armed men to go to this gentleman's to go to my neighbor's door, basically, to kick down this person's door, to drag them away from their friends and family, kidnap them, and lock them up in a cage for several years because they
Hmm.
didn't want to pay tribute to the politician that they didn't want to pay for the things that I want them to pay for,
Hmm.
under the threat of violence. And okay, you can have that position, but would you do that yourself? If you're if your position is that it's okay to threaten your neighbors with violence, because you want things to be paid for, you want everything to, you want the education system to be funded, you want the roads to be funded, you want the defense force to be funded. Okay, well, I would like that too, but what is your position? If your position is that it's okay to force people to hand over money so that you can pay for those endeavors, then why don't you do it yourself? Why don't you knock on the doors of all your neighbors and, have a
That's a
firearm
good
with
point.
you and,
Hmm.
just tell them, if you're not going to hand over money to so that I can fund the education, pay for my child's education, or fund the roads, or fund this defense force, or pay, support the less fortunate, then I'm going to steal lots of money from you. And if you don't hand over your money, I'm going to
Yeah.
kidnap you. I'm going to do violence unto you. I'm going to lock you up in my basement. How does that sound?
Yeah.
And that's when you can get them to actually see, what they're actually saying. What is your position? Be clear and specific about what your actual position is.
That's really good advice, and that's a good way to look at it, because it's hard to, like, I'm just, like I was saying, trying to think of a lot of the discussions that I get into, and like things get thrown at me and we kind of throw ideas back and forth. But I do, like I was saying earlier, that did come up. Like, well, there is some people that just want to let other people handle the business, kind of thing. Like, I just want to focus on what I'm doing and what's around me, and I don't have time to worry about other things. And so you bring up great points. I like what you said, the things that should be asked. And maybe that's a good way to kind of tie in, because we were kind of talking before we started recording about authority, and how people have this belief that, this belief in authority. And we were kind of, you were going to kind of talk about a couple of experiments, which I'm really interested in hearing, because people do seem to have this obedience to this authority. And you were talking about experiments, like, obedience to authority experiments. And I think you called it the Milgram experiments, if I'm correct. I might have pronounced that wrong. I do apologize if I did. But could you kind of break that down? Because people do seem to have this belief in authority, and it's really interesting.
Well, here's the thing about the Milgram experiments. Many people just hear, short snippets about it, but if you actually read the book Obedience to Authority by Stanley Milgram, I
Hmm.
mean, somebody else pointed this out to me, but when I actually read the book and I actually just, looked at it, you can look into all the variants of his experiments. Obviously, the thing about the Milgram experiments, just to be clear about what that is, there was a gentleman named Stanley Milgram who performed very well. These experiments are very renowned for supposedly, uncovering, man's nature when it comes to obeying authority.
Right.
When they are ordered to, there was like the role, the experiment was like there was a gentleman in the room that was like the authority figure, like the white coated professor or whatever, the one conducting the experiments, and there was the subject who was, no, the authority figure was an actor, by the way, and there was a subject who was genuinely, he was the test subject, and then there was somebody else who was being electrocuted, and the authority figure told
Right.
them,
I remember this.
and the authority figure told him, like, you have to electrocute him, and the experiment was about, like, to what extent would people, obey an authority figure, and the results were that many people ended up electrocuting people to death. Well, not really, actually, because the people who were being electrocuted were actors. Well,
Hmm.
and they were acting as if they died, and that's kind of like, and that's kind of the conclusion that people take away from it. Like, you see, people are actually able to electrocute somebody to death when an authority figure tells them to. Well, the thing that they don't understand about well, you see, that's just human nature. You
I
can't
hear. I
do
was going to
anything.
bring that up too. Human nature. I hear that a lot. Oh my god.
But then he did another variation, which is very interesting, and I suggest people look into it. It's called Experiment 17, and it's probably it's called Two Peers Rebel, if I'm not if
Okay,
I'm
I
if I'm
gotta write that
correct.
down.
And what they did was they put, I believe it was one or two individuals next to him, and the roles of one actor, supposedly, they put an actor next to him, and the role of the actor was to be the dissident, so to speak. It was like, okay, so the role of the actor was like he was supposed to, how do I say this? He was sitting next to the test subject, and he would say, "Well, this is evil. I'm not doing this. Screw this. I'm not doing this nonsense.
Hmm.
This is wrong." So eventually, I believe it was. I mean, almost every single time, almost every single time the test subject immediately stopped as well. Right after the actor said, screw this, I'm not doing this anymore, the test subject stood up as well, saying, yeah, no, he's right, this is wrong, I'm not doing this. Well, what does that tell you? It tells you that when somebody else gives you the right example, then somebody else is prone to follow suit right afterwards.
Right. That's
And
fascinating.
that's what we see in today in today's day and age about this phenomenon called the bystander effect. When schools perform these experiments, like they take a fish out of a bowl or something, and they say that the teacher instructs everybody water in it is going to be grounded for life or whatever. Not who's it's going to be, get a severe punishment. I
Right.
said grounded for life. I'm switching terms in my head, but I apologies. But you get the picture, you get the
Yeah.
gist of it. But eventually, all the people, were just sitting there. Well, I don't want to have any punishment, but that fish, I mean, I hate the fish is gonna die.
Yeah.
I don't want, but I don't want to be. I don't want to be punished. And eventually, some individuals going to say, "Well, screw this! I'm just going to put it back into the bowl."
Mm-hmm.
And then, the professor came back, and I just saw this somewhere. But the professor came back and he said, "Look at what the world did to all of you. You disregard your own moral conscience in favor of the commands issued by authority figures." I mean, but that's just that's just another variation of the bystander effect. But when eventually somebody gives the right example, that's when other people are quick to follow suit. When
Right.
if people go around disobeying and are actually saying, well, I know it's wrong, but I don't want to be in trouble or something. But when the people who actually choose their own moral conscience rather than obeying the commands of a political authority, of a politician, those people, they were always remembered as the heroes throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have the My Lai massacre of the individuals who, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's just a horrible, horrible experiment during the Vietnam War, where these American troops were just shooting at children and shooting at innocent civilians. And there was this one chopper pilot, and there was a gunner. There was a mounted gunner. Those two individuals who actually pointed their mounted gun at all of their fellow soldiers and said, "You are going to stop now. You're going to stop murdering innocent children. You're going to stop murdering these innocent people just because you were given the order to do so. Otherwise, we're going to stand here and shoot you." And
Mm-hmm.
those people are actually remembered as heroes for having done so, for having disregarded their own, for having disregarded their own the commands and the orders that they've been given. The people who rescued slaves, who helped slaves escape through the Underground Railroads, are remembered as heroes for having done so, for having disobeyed the authority figures. The people who hid Jews during the reign of the
Mm-hmm.
during the reign of the Third Reich, they are remembered as heroes for having done so as well. All the people who followed their own conscience in lieu of the commands issued by authority figures or the law, who chose to do the right thing regardless of what the law said, are always remembered as heroes. And the people, the bystanders who didn't do anything, nobody wants to be like them.
That's
Never.
so true. Yeah.
But it's always important to realize that once you give the right example, other people will follow suit.
That's so. I'm just really thinking about what you're saying, and I really am, Alexander. Like that's so powerful what you're saying. It really is. I hope people are really listening to this. That like because you hear people like, oh well, it's the law. I gotta follow it. And you really break it down well, like, and with your examples too of like what that you can go against it, and that is what matters. And it's really interesting that more that by like I've never that bystander is a perfect way to describe it too, because most people are like that, and they'll just, they just follow it blindly. It's a law, they follow it. If it doesn't matter if it's in a contradiction within themselves, they know it's wrong, they'll keep doing it. And that's what drives me crazy, because people have this, like we were just talking about, this need to follow authority no matter what. And you really bring a great point. Like, people need to find courage and to start standing up against this. And I do believe we can change the world. I'm not one of these people that, like I was saying earlier, I've talked to people and they're like, this is just human nature. How are we going to change it? It's too far gone. And I don't believe that. I wouldn't be here if I believed that. Don't believe in that human nature is even a thing like people think it is. This is a not as not that at all.
Yeah, so just to bring it back to these lines of questioning,
Hmm.
so a mistake many people make when they ponder these ideas about questioning, asking questions in this
Hmm.
way. You know, um, these lines of questioning only apply to the issues that truly matters, which is the belief in authority, because
Great
that's
point.
that's every that's the entire thing. Surely, I like to talk about scientific matters, I like to ruminate about esoteric matters,
Hmm.
but none of that addresses the underlying issue that truly matters, which is the idea that some people can have an exemption from morality and can do things that are blatantly immoral and unjust. When they call, those immoral actions the law and call themselves authority, that's the true enemy here. You
Right.
can look at all the issues in the world related to government oppression and injustice, such as the machinations of the WEF, as a bunch of, like wires that are all banded together and are bunched together and are linked a large single wire which is just plugged into the wall. Just one plug, and it's connected to basically everything: the
Hmm.
control over the market, the monetary system, the WEF, vaccines, etc. You only have to remove that one plug from the wall, and all those other issues dissipate. That one plug is the belief in authority. Who's going to enforce the WEF's policies on people when nobody believes in authority? And ultimately, nobody is willing to enforce that on others. Klaus Schwab, or whatever his name is,
Hmm.
will have to go door to door himself, and I bet he'll get I bet he'll get a bullet in his head the very first door he knocks on. You
Good
know,
point.
and
Yeah.
that's why I primarily discuss the topics pertaining to voluntarism and libertarianism, because those are the topics that are truly going to lead to freedom. You can wax eloquence about 9/11, and you can be so thorough and articulate in your explanation, and the person might agree with you and change their mind about what they think of the 9/11 tragedy.
Hmm.
But all they're going to say in the end is, and that's why we need to have this person in office and not
Yep.
that person.
Yep. I've
And there
heard
you
that.
go again, then you're going to restart the cycle again. Well, that didn't do much in terms of getting them to see the underlying issue, did it? Which is the belief
No.
in authority. So I would advise people, don't bother talking about anything other than the principles pertaining to voluntarism and libertarianism. And if you want to familiarize yourself with those topics, I would, gladly encourage you look at, my website and my channel to,
Hmm.
actually look at all the videos that I've made. And I'm actually going to make a documentary in the future which actually puts things in a very nice package, um, just for people to familiarize themselves with what voluntarism and libertarianism is actually about. And those things, look, those things about 9/11 and those esoteric matters that a lot of people like to talk about and ruminate about, those things can be interesting to people who like to philosophize and intellectualize. You and me like to philosophize and
Hmm.
intellectualize and think about stuff,
Yep.
Rick. And you know we like to think about things, but the truth is the vast majority of people don't like to think and philosophize. They don't
Hmm.
want to think. They don't want to ponder about philosophy and all of that. So you need to stick to the basics, and don't go
It's great
beyond that.
advice. Yeah.
Unless don't go beyond that unless the individual insists, of course. But the reason that I'm hopeful of the future is because of my mindset, and because I know what the target should be. if your target is to change the minds of billions of people, and by steadfastly, by steadfastly preaching at them, then yeah, there isn't much hope. If that's
Yeah.
the method, if that's the modus operandi, then yeah, there isn't much hope at all, because you're not going to have much success that way. But if your mindset is 99% of humanity is already voluntarists, and the target is to bring it out of them by getting them to think about the contradiction in their own mind, and by showing them that their beliefs about right and wrong do not match their beliefs about politics, then there is obviously a ton of hope. I am actually
That's
so positive that we will see exponential growth in the amount of voluntarists very soon. The thing is, you don't need to reach 100% of the population. You just need about 10 to 20% who say,
right.
yep, I don't believe in the pseudo religious dogma of politics anymore. I want every interaction to be voluntary. Well, then the remaining 80 to 90% is very quickly going to follow suit, like we just said.
No, that's a great point, Alexander, and you really break that down. You really do. I mean, I'm not just saying that. You break this down really perfectly, and really, and simply, and I really appreciate that about you, because I mean, and I'm guilty of it. I get hung up on certain things at times, and then I find myself in this discuss. I'll catch myself in these discussions where it's not going to ever change anything. We're just it's opinions back and forth. But and it came to me like what you're talking about, and I call it the root of evil. It just came to me because I do a lot of gardening, and at one time when I was pulling weeds in my garden, I would just pull the top of the weed off, and I would do that like every week, but the weeds kept growing, ever kept growing. And then I one day I had somebody told me, you got to get the root, you got to get to the root and get the tap root out of there, and when you do that, weeds gone. So I started doing that, and it does. I really think it kind of blends into what you're saying, is that we're all focused on the tops of the problems, which I look at as the top of the root, like the top of the weed. We're not getting to the root, and then that's what you're doing. The way you're explaining it, we have to break it down to that, and once you get to the root, you get that root out of there that's causing all of these other problems. We're going to see a change very quickly, I think. And that you break it down perfect. And that's what I just think of that all the time, that people are just kind of pulling the tops of weeds off when they get into all these other topics, and they're not getting to the root of the problem, which is people's belief in authority. That people have There's some people that have this authority.
I'm going to paraphrase it, but there's a brilliant quote that is very pertinent to what we're taking. It's
Okay.
very apropos to what we're talking about here. There's hundreds of people, striking at the branches of evil, and then
Mm-hmm.
there is a very few striking at its roots.
Yep.
So, and that's where we need to go. That's where we need to focus our attention to. Like we have to target. What is the reason why we're in this situation to begin with? And that is because most people believe in things that don't match their own beliefs about right
Exactly.
and wrong.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like another thing that I would like to encourage people to do, like especially those, like, I mean, also something is just give the right example. I mean, one thing is I don't usually, like this is just very very interesting, but I think it might be useful to some people because it helped me for like it helped me a lot as well. Like this is something I just incidentally um like thought about, like, wow, that is actually very effective. It actually gives you kind of an opening to actually talk about these things.
Okay.
Well, if you just give the right example, it's important to it's very important to distinguish personalities from principles. When many people think of voluntarists and anarchists, they immediately tend to picture an obnoxious, rude, uncivilized individual who doesn't care
Mm-hmm.
about other people. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that those people don't exist, but they're obviously not in my social circle. I don't like to be around people like that. But that
Correct. Yep.
doesn't, that doesn't mean that, personalities, I'm not going to, succumb to the guilt by association fallacy of, like, there are people who believe in who understand that all interactions should be voluntary, and that there
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be a ruling class governing the lives of all of us. Well, the fact that some people believe that who don't really give the right example in life, like
Hmm.
who have very unorthodox ways of living, or like dressing and what have you not. It's and some people who might not behave in a certain preferable way. Like, I mean, that's kind of tantamount to saying that, well, Adolf Hitler, well, 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4. It's it's erroneous to say that 2 plus 2 equals 4 because Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin believed that 2 plus 2 equals 4. And they
Right.
weren't good people, so therefore the argument that 2 plus 2 equals 4 isn't good either. That's not a rational argument. And
Yeah.
so is the notion that, whoever's, wearing the label of anarchist is supposedly to be the quintessence of what the philosophy is supposed to be.
Right.
But, like, I mean, act accordingly. If you're someone who would advocate self-ownership and individual liberty, because that's all we're talking about here, then act like it. Be a gentleman. Show respect for other people's self-ownership. When people see that this is not about Molotov cocktails and punk rock, it is
Hmm.
about self-ownership, individual liberty, and the principle of non-aggression. You know, so when you're somebody who is very polite, genuine, respectful, honest, and helps a lot of people, other individuals will be interested in what you think about, politics, for instance. And when you
Yeah.
say, well, I don't really believe in politics since every individual owns himself and should be free to make his own choices voluntarily, and doing harm unto other individuals and threatening to do harm unto other individuals is inherently wrong. And the idea of politics is that some individuals should have an exemption from that, and that people can turn wrongful behaviors such as stealing, trespassing, coercing,
Hmm.
and assaulting into right behavior by way of scribbles on parchments, a change of rhetoric in elections. And I simply don't believe in that religion. When somebody hears that for the
Yep.
first time coming from a respectable individual, they will actually ponder it. They will actually give it thoughts. They will actually entertain that. Like, they will think about it, and perhaps they will want to know more. And you can explain it to them by means of questioning. Well, explain. You can
Yeah.
actually have an opening to ask them these questions
Right.
about what they believe, and you can open the door in such ways as well. If you want to change the world, start with yourself first. If you have,
So important. Yeah.
the whole thing is just do as I say, not as I do mentality is not going to get you very far. That's my
Yeah.
opinion.
I agree, and you're saying something that's so powerful to me only because I'm seeing it, kind of what you're describing, a kind of happening around me, and I've talked about it on my radio show that in my community, the community's kind of coming together, and it's really a neat, fascinating thing to see where people in the community are like I'm getting to know people in my community, and we're kind of interacting with each other, we're helping each other, and it's really powerful, and it's kind of like what you're describing, like it's totally voluntary, and we're helping each other, and it's really a powerful thing to see. And then it's kind of started off with me and a couple of friends, and now there's more people over the last few months, especially, where we're kind of all getting together and just having these discussions, and then in that in turn we're helping each other, and it's really cool, like this voluntary system that's happening. And I think you make great points that it has to start within yourself first, and then as you're doing that, and it kind of starts radiating out. And so it's really important that people take to heart what you're saying, Alexander, that you have to get right with yourself, and then radiate that out forward is the best way I can put it. And I'm seeing it happen around me, so it's definitely possible. And so who knows where it can go? It starts with you and then radiates further and further.
Yeah, so I need to give this caveat because I
Okay.
think it's very important. Like, I'm not saying like we shouldn't talk to other people. We should just, be the light and just be passive and don't talk to
Hmm.
people. Don't spread the message.
Right.
It's not what I'm saying. We should be active and we should be, like, I mean, things that people like you are doing, like having a podcast and trying to spread these ideas around. That's
Hmm.
what I'm talking about. It's just in person when you're talking to when you're engaging with other people, like you really many the gist of what I'm actually trying to say is the problem is actually right in your own mindset, and
Exactly.
sometimes it's in your own behavior
Hmm.
that is preventing you to reach other people. And in obviously the thing that we've been discussing throughout the entirety of our shows together, Rick, is your approach. How are you apprehending people? Are you just looking at people like some sort of audience that is supposed to listen to your lecture, your
Hmm.
impromptu lecture? Like it's if that's a horrible mindset to have. And
Yeah.
like again,
Yeah.
like we need to change their minds. That's a horrible attitude to have. It's not it's not going to get you very far. Like
Great point. Yep.
again, you don't get to change anybody's minds. People change their own minds. You're not to, if there was like a button to program everybody according to how you want everybody to behave and program. Well, that's something that tyrants have done,
I
or
was going to say that. Yeah.
have tried to do.
Yep.
Throughout
Yep.
the entirety of humanity. Like, oh, here's this. Here's so many people, and how will we shape society?
Hmm.
How will we shape it? Like as if it was a bit of clay or something. Like without free will, without an individual purpose, without intellect. You know,
Yeah.
without rational faculty. What do you think human beings are? And that's just a horrible way to look at human beings. And once again, you're not that much of a voluntarist if you want to decide how people should think. And that's
That's a
that's
great
not what
point.
not at all what I'm advocating. My lines of questioning are just, well, not, I'm not saying my, but these lines of questioning are
Yeah.
just only supposed to bring out of them what is already there. It's just it is in conflict, that there is just a huge conflict that they haven't seen before, and that's what you're getting them to see, and that's what you're
Great
getting them
point.
to think about. And that's the goal, to try to
Yep.
get them to think. The goal is not to change their mind, but it's trying to create the conditions so that they will change their own mind.
That's
And
so
that
true. Wow.
and again, like humans, I engage with many people every single day, and I just I never see these brutal these I don't see evil people who want to eat each other, and if there were no government, everybody would start stealing. I don't see these people around me. I see fair, gentle, very good people here every day where I
Hmm.
engage with people. And every time you give the right example, you hold the door open for somebody else, you help somebody else, or you give again, how do I say,
Lead by
you
example.
exactly, you
Yeah.
engage with in conversations in the correct way. You respectfully interact with them. You address them with, like, you don't have to go this far, but that's it's very respectful to do, like,
Hmm.
sir or madam, or can I help you, or I didn't, just very very basic things that as adults we should actually have understand, because so many people
Exactly.
have
Yeah.
their guard up. Literally every almost so many people. That's one thing that I see. Many people have their guard up, like
That's true.
like they
Yes.
don't trust other people. But once
Hmm.
you explain to them, look, I respect you as an individual, as an individual who owns himself, and I don't want to force something on you. I don't, it's yeah, it's just. It's just very weird to explain this way, because I've never taught. I just recently thought about this. Like every time, when you do good things to other people,
Yeah.
those people will will do things to you. And that's actually the rule, the biblical aphorism, like do unto others as you would like, do unto others like you would have liked to have done unto you. And
Yeah. But
that's
people,
it's
you're right. People are guarded. You bring up a really good point, that people that are really have their guard up, and I've noticed that too. But I've also noticed exactly what you're saying, Alexander. Especially like people that I talk to, like in the community, even where I'm living. they're not bad. They're not bad people, like you said. We all basically want the same thing, and and that it's really fascinating when you get to know people. And that's what I keep advocating for. Is like I tell people, get out and start interacting with people and start getting to
Right.
know people.
Exactly.
I know people that have lived in their neighborhood for 20 years. They don't know who their neighbors are. They don't know wave at them. Like, hey, how's it going? And they're polite that way, but they don't know anything about them. I'm changing that, at least where around me. I'm getting to know everybody around me and interacting with them, and it's actually a really, like I said, I've been talking about it for a while now because it's fascinating to see how it's going. It's just, people are talking and we're getting to know each other and helping each other, and that's where the changes it's going to take place. It's really a neat thing to see, but people are just so guarded. You do nice things for somebody and they're like, why are you doing this? That's a really programmed state that somebody's in when
Yeah,
they
but obviously, like, the thing about people being guarded, you're not going to get, get a. What do you expect? Do you expect to have a very nice conversation about a stateless society when when you're going to preach at them about why why they're evil and why they're
good point.
advocating your enslavement? That's
Right.
not going to bring that guard down, is it?
No,
So
very true.
obviously, like, I hope it's very clear now that these lines of questioning. Again, I have my own precedents. I can honestly vouch for this method. It is every time I've done it. If you do it correctly, it works. It
Hmm.
brings you. It bears fruits, and it will actually get people to make get people to give you the answers that you would like to see from people. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you would love other people. You would like to see people who don't advocate violence onto others, don't you? Well,
Hmm.
if you ask them the questions, like you just said, I mean, nobody wants to nobody wants to harm other people. Nobody wants to force and threaten other people. But at the
Yeah.
same time, they do. But is that actually their true opinion?
Yeah. Good point.
I froze for a
Fascinating.
second. Am
Oh,
I here?
you're back. Yep, you're back. Yep.
Okay. Oh, I believe
Oh,
my camera froze for a second. Let me
that happened
just.
the last time, but that's cool because we made it through part three, Alexander, and I just want to thank you for being here for these three episodes, and I hope to have you back again. I would love to have you on every once in a while to touch base and really go through some more important topics because I think this is a great conversation that we've had in these last three shows, and really you bring home some great points and some great ways to go about things. And I just really hope people will check out part one and two first, please, guys, because this is building and this built into something. So I just want to thank you, Alexander, so much for everything that you're doing, for the information and content that you're putting out there, because it's amazing. And I'm really looking forward to this documentary that you're working on, and all the other content that you're putting out. I'll make sure I put links in the description, as I promised, guys, for Alexander's work and his YouTube channel and everywhere you can go and check out his content. So I think you're doing amazing, Alexander. I really do. And I've enjoyed these conversations so much, and I've learned so much as well. And so I think you're doing amazing. And it was great to actually get part three done. I'm so happy we got it. We could finally make it happen.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Awesome. Yeah, you're doing great, my friend. So please, I will keep in touch. I will, and I hope to have you back. I will definitely get you back in the future. I would love to just touch base and see what's going on with you and talk about some more important things because it has to be discussed. I think that that's where a lot of magic happens is in these discussions. So you're amazing, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rick.
All right. And do you want to just wait in the background while I wrap up the show here and I can
Of course, yeah.
you can chat? Perfect. All right. So give me just a couple minutes here, Alexander, and I'll be right back with you. All right, there we go, my friends. Part three, as promised. I really do hope that you guys go. If you have not seen part one and two, please, please, before you watch this one, well, actually, if you've already heard me saying this, you've watched it. So, uh, you know, one and two have to be seen first because this is building on something, as I said earlier. So I just want to thank Alexander once again for joining me, doing part three with me, and doing all of these episodes because I really think that he breaks things down great, explains them really, really well. And questions that need to be asked. It's really helped me with knowing these questions and kind of having a, just a way to go about things, and it's just made a big difference. And so I just want to thank you all so much for joining me, for all the support that you're giving me. It's amazing, guys. Thank you so much. So I'll be back very soon. Another great interview. I got some great ones lined up for this month. I'm very excited. It's going to be a great month of interviews. So I'm going to be bringing a lot of different people on, different opinions, different thoughts that they have. And so please join me, and I will see you very soon. Take care. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. It's so important. And I'll be back very soon with another interview, guys. So peace. Take care.